I would rather burn everything I own than give you a single cent. I stared into Rose's eyes as the flames devoured my life's work. Her expression twisted between disbelief and panic, but there was no turning back. Not anymore. The mansion that once symbolized my devotion was now just timber and ashes, and in this moment, it felt lighter than the burden I had carried for years. Rose never thought I would do it. She always believed I was the weak one, the man who would cling to her shadow. No matter how many times she crushed my dignity under her heel, she used to smirk, looking at me like I was nothing more than a servant meant to deliver wealth into her greedy hands. But today, all she could do was watch helplessly as her dreams of inheriting my fortune went up in flames. Michael, stop this. Madness. Her voice cracked, not out of concern for me, but for everything she had hoped to steal. She reached out, but I took a step back, away from her touch that had once felt like salvation, but had only ever been poison. I used to believe that love meant sacrifice. I believed it so deeply that I drained my soul to fill her empty desires, thinking that if I gave enough, she might finally see me. But no matter how much I offered, it was never enough. She wanted everything. She wanted me to be a hollow shell, a puppet she could control until there was nothing left but strings. Now she was witnessing the end of her game. My decision was final. If I couldn't have happiness, I wouldn't let her pretend she could seize it from my broken hands. "Michael, think about your future," she screamed, desperation bleeding into her voice. But she never once thought about my future before this moment. She only thought about what I could give her, what she could take from me until I had nothing left but regret. I smiled bitterly, watching the fire consume every corner of the estate. "This is my future," I whispered, loud enough for her to hear over the crackling flames. "A future without you." I met Rose when I was 23, at a time when my life was just beginning to gain color. Back then, I was still foolish enough to believe that the world was fair, that love was pure, and that if I gave everything I had to one person, she would naturally hold my heart carefully in her hands. I never thought she would crush it like dry autumn leaves beneath her feet. Rose was dazzling from the very beginning. She had this kind of brightness that could blind a man if he stared for too long, a dangerous kind of beauty that drew people in without mercy. I was no exception. The moment I saw her, I was already losing the battle I didn't even know I had entered. At first, she was sweet. She would smile at me as if I was the only man in the world worth her attention. Her laughter was like music, and every word she spoke felt like a secret promise whispered only to me. I still remember the first time she said, "Michael, with you, I feel safe." That simple sentence was all it took to chain my heart to hers completely. I worked day and night, tirelessly chasing every opportunity, every contract, every small chance, to build an empire that could match her ambitions. I thought if I gave her a life filled with luxury, she would stay. If I gave her everything, she would love me just as much as I loved her. But I never realized Rose didn't want love. She wanted power, status, wealth. I was just the convenient stepping stone she used to reach higher grounds. The deeper I fell, the colder she became. She stopped looking at me the way she once did. Her eyes, which used to reflect my silhouette, now only mirrored her endless greed. Even when I placed priceless jewels around her neck, she never smiled the way she used to. Even when I handed her the keys to my mansion, she didn't say thank you. She only said, "Michael, next time, make it bigger." I swallowed the disappointment each time, convincing myself that maybe she just needed more time, maybe she just wanted to see if I could go even further. I told myself that once I reached the peak, she would finally be satisfied. But I was wrong. No matter how high I climbed, Rose always looked beyond me, her eyes fixed on horizons I could never reach. And when I thought I had given her the world, she asked for something more terrifying than all the wealth I had accumulated. She asked for my soul. Clark, my so-called friend, had been lurking in the shadows all along. Rose introduced him to me with a charming laugh, saying, "Clark is just a friend from my past. Don't overthink it." I trusted her blindly, believed her words as gospel. But I didn't see the way her eyes softened when she looked at him, the way her smile grew warmer in his presence. I was a fool. A fool who thought loyalty and love were enough to win her heart. A fool who gave everything without realizing I was feeding a fire that would one day consume him entirely. Our relationship, if it could even be called that, was built entirely on my sacrifices and her cold indifference. She never loved me, not for a single moment. What she loved was the power my devotion gave her. What she loved was the control she held over me, the puppet strings she pulled with ease. Even Ashley, the woman who had once quietly admired me from afar, saw through Rose's facade long before I did. Ashley never dared to say a word, always staying in the background, watching helplessly as I destroyed myself for a woman who would never love me back. Sometimes I caught her gaze lingering on me, filled with something almost like sorrow. But I ignored it, too blinded by my obsession with Rose to see anything else. Now, as I stand before the burning ruins of everything I built, I finally understand. Rose never needed me. She only needed what I could give her, and once I was empty, once there was nothing left to drain from my body or my soul, she was ready to discard me like yesterday's news. But not this time. If she thought she could take the last pieces of my broken heart and my hard-earned wealth, she was wrong. If she thought she could walk away from the ashes of my life, carrying my legacy as her trophy, she was gravely mistaken. I'd rather turn it all to dust. I'd rather watch the flames consume every cent, every contract, every piece of gold she once desired, than let her have the satisfaction of claiming victory over me. As I looked at Rose, her eyes wide with disbelief, her lips trembling, I felt nothing but a bitter calmness in my chest. Finally, I was free. Finally, the chains she had, wrapped around my heart, had melted away in the fire. No longer her puppet, no longer her fool. Just a man who had learned, far too late, the true cost of love given to the wrong person. It started with whispers, quiet, slippery words that clung to my mind long after they were spoken. At first, I ignored them, brushing them off as envy from those who couldn't stand to see me and Rose together. I thought they were just trying to poison the little happiness I believed I had left. I wanted to believe that. I needed to believe it, but the truth has a cruel way of creeping in, even through the cracks you desperately try to seal. I remember the first real crack like it happened just seconds ago. It was a dinner party at our estate, one of many Rose insisted we host to maintain our status. She glided through the room in her crimson gown, her laughter delicate, charming, effortlessly pulling everyone into her orbit. She was flawless, mesmerizing. But when I saw her standing beside Clark, too close, too familiar, my chest tightened in a way I couldn't explain. Their eyes met in a fleeting moment that said far more than any words could convey. Something twisted inside me, something sharp and bitter, yet I buried it under layers of denial. After all, Clark was my friend. He had been there in the early days, offering advice, support, and what I thought was loyalty. He had helped me close deals, expand my network, and strengthen my empire. I trusted him almost as much as I trusted her. That was my first mistake. It wasn't just Clark. It was the way Rose had changed, the way she stopped asking about my day, the way she no longer looked impressed when I told her about a successful negotiation. The way her kisses grew colder, more mechanical, like she was performing a duty rather than expressing affection. Every night when she thought I had fallen asleep, she would check her phone, her screen casting a cold glow on her flawless face. I caught her once, her lips curving into a secretive smile at a message she never let me see. When I asked about it, she turned to me with eyes sharp enough to cut through my soul and said, "Don't you trust me, Michael?" Of course I did, or at least I wanted to, but trust, I was beginning to understand, is a dangerous game of self-deception. It was Ashley who tried to pull me back from the edge, though her voice was always cautious, always trembling with restraint. She never spoke ill of Rose directly, but there was always pain in her eyes when she said, "Michael, sometimes love can blind us to what's right in front of us." I pretended not to understand her meaning, pretended that her gaze didn't linger on me just a little too long, filled with silent pleas I wasn't ready to hear. But the cracks were widening. There was one night, more brutal than the rest, when I returned home early from a trip. My flight had been delayed, my phone dead, and I had no way to warn Rose of my arrival. I thought I would surprise her. I thought she would be happy, but I was the one who was surprised. The moment I opened the door to our bedroom, I felt my entire world shift beneath my feet. There was Rose, sitting at the edge of our bed, her hand resting far too comfortably on Clark's arm. Their heads were close, too close, and her expression, her expression was softer than anything she had shown me in months. They froze when they saw me, like two thieves caught in the act. Rose's eyes widened, but not in guilt. No, what I saw in her eyes was something worse. Annoyance, as if my presence had merely interrupted a moment she felt entitled to. "Michael," she said, her voice flat, void of panic, void of the affection she used to coat my name with. "You're home early." Clark had the audacity to meet my gaze without a shred of remorse, as if I were the intruder in my own life. The weight in my chest grew unbearable, crushing me from the inside out. My lips parted, but no words came out. What could I say? What excuse could I make for them this time? None. There were no more illusions left to cling to. The betrayal was naked before me, unashamed and raw. Even then, I wanted to believe it was a misunderstanding. That maybe Clark had come over to discuss business. That maybe I had misread the closeness between them. That maybe, just maybe, I was the one poisoning my own mind with doubt. But Rose shattered those fragile hopes with a single sentence. "You should have called," she said coldly, rising from the bed with the elegance of a queen dismissing her subject. Clark and I were in the middle of something important. The knife twisted deeper. I forced myself to speak, though my voice came out, hoarse and unfamiliar. "What could be more important than your husband?" She smiled then, a smile so cruel it burned itself into my memory. "Survival, Michael," she replied. "I can't tie my future to a man who's already peaked." Clark's smirk mirrored her cruelty, as if they had rehearsed this scene 100 times in my absence. In that moment, I saw it all clearly. The manipulation, the lies, the slow erosion of my worth in her eyes. She had used me to build her kingdom, and now she was ready to crown a new king. The realization was suffocating. I turned away, not because I was weak, but because I knew if I stayed a second longer, I might become someone I could never forgive. 3. Man who loved her had already died, and in his place, something far colder, far more dangerous was beginning to awaken. Sleep became a stranger to me. Every time I closed my eyes, their faces haunted me in the dark, clearer than any nightmare I had ever known. Rose's cold gaze. Clark's smug, silent triumph. It replayed over and over, like a cruel film loop that I couldn't escape no matter how tightly I shut my mind. The house, once filled with warmth and laughter, felt like a hollow shell. The walls that once held our memories now suffocated me. Every room whispered reminders of how foolishly I had loved her, how completely I had given her everything, my trust, my wealth, my future. Now, it all felt like ashes slipping through my fingers. I wanted to hate her. I wanted to burn every feeling I ever had for Rose until there was nothing left but cold emptiness. But every time I thought I was close to extinguishing that fire, another ember sparked inside me. I still remembered her smile from the days when we were truly happy, or at least, when I thought we were. I remembered the way she used to reach for my hand, how she used to say my name like it was her favorite song. I clung to those fragments like a drowning man clutching at debris, knowing full well they would never save me. What hurt the most wasn't her betrayal. It was the terrifying possibility that perhaps she had never loved me at all, that I had built our entire world on a foundation of lies while convincing myself it was solid rock. The pain was sharp, but the questions were even sharper. Had I been nothing more than a stepping stone for her ambitions? Had she ever looked at me and seen more than just a bank account? Every moment we had shared began to feel counterfeit, carefully crafted to deceive me. And the realization tore at the very fabric of my soul. I started to see everything with new, bitter clarity. The way she'd casually dismiss my dreams while praising Clark's every word. The subtle distance she placed between us long before I noticed it. Her perfect performance as a devoted wife, masking her true desires beneath layers of practiced affection. Was I truly so blind? No answer ever came. Only the gnawing silence that consumed my days and devoured my nights. Ashley's concern was the only light flickering in my darkness. She never pushed, never demanded explanations. Instead, she offered quiet presence, sitting across from me in the empty dining room as if her silence could shield me from my own thoughts. But even her gentle presence couldn't numb the storm inside me. I could feel the weight of her gaze whenever she thought I wasn't looking, filled with unspoken sorrow, filled with the kind of understanding I wasn't ready to accept. Maybe she had seen this all along and I had been too proud, too blind to heed her warnings. The suspense of what would come next clawed at my mind. What were they planning? How far had they gone behind my back? Had they already decided to strip me of everything, leaving me with nothing but regret? Every day felt like I was waiting for a blade to fall, knowing it would but never knowing when. I found myself walking through the estate late at night, pacing the cold marble floors, my thoughts a whirlwind of fury and despair. I imagined confronting, her demanding the truth from her lips. But every time I pictured it, I knew exactly what she would say. She wouldn't deny it. No. Rose had reached a point where she no longer needed to hide her contempt. She wore it proudly, like a crown she had stolen from my head, and Clark, ever the opportunist, stood beside her, basking in the glow of his silent victory. A part of me, the part still clinging to the past, hoped that maybe, just maybe, she would feel some guilt, that she would remember the man who had once moved heaven and earth for her happiness. But that hope was a dying flicker, smothered by the weight of reality. My heart twisted in a way I never thought possible. Betrayal isn't a single wound. It's thousands of invisible cuts, each one bleeding a little more life from you until you're left hollow. And yet, even in my agony, I felt something else stirring beneath the surface of my pain. It was slow, faint, but unmistakable. Resolve. A cold determination began to weave itself through the shards of my broken heart. If Rose thought she had defeated me, she was wrong. If Clark believed he had won, he had underestimated me. I had given them everything once, but never again. They had taken my trust and burned it to the ground. Now it was my turn to set fire to what they valued most. I would not beg for her love. I would not crawl for their mercy. No, I would rise from the ruins of this betrayal and forge something far stronger than anything they could ever comprehend. The Yuan. Suspense of my next move seemed to hang in the air, almost tangible. Even they must have felt it, even if they pretended not to. Because beneath my silence, beneath the shadow of my pain, a storm was gathering, and when it broke, it would consume everything in its path. Just when I thought I had understood the full depth of their betrayal, fate decided to twist the knife even deeper. It was a rainy afternoon when it happened, the kind of relentless downpour that soaks through to the bone. I had been staring blankly out the window of my study, watching the raindrops race each other down the glass, when my phone buzzed on the desk. For a brief second, I considered ignoring it. What more could possibly hurt me? But some quiet instinct inside me forced me to reach for it. The message was from an unknown number. At first, it seemed like spam, but as I read the words, my blood froze in my veins. You think they've taken everything, Michael? Look closer. They've already started selling off your assets behind your back. My pulse thundered in my ears. No name, no proof. But my heart knew the truth before my mind could even process it. Rose and Clark weren't waiting. They were already dismantling my life, piece by piece in the shadows. It wasn't enough for them to steal my love and my trust. Now they were gutting my legacy, emptying it of everything I had built. Without wasting a second, I stormed to my office vault. Hands trembling but fueled by adrenaline, I unlocked the safe and pulled out the folder that contained all the financial records, the investments, the properties, the accounts, everything that had once made me a man of power. Flipping through, The documents, I saw it clearly. Quiet transactions. Transfers I never authorized. Liquidation of shares. Assets moved to unfamiliar accounts. My name had been used like a puppet. Forged signatures mimicking my own handwriting so perfectly that anyone on the outside would assume I had willingly stripped myself of everything. The storm inside me exploded into a hurricane. So this was their grand design. Not just to betray me in love, but to erase me from the world I had carved with my own 2 hands. To reduce me to nothing while they rose like vultures from my ruin. For a brief moment, I felt the weight of despair crush my chest. But then, like steel hardening in fire, something shifted inside me. No, I wouldn't let them win. There was still time. Not much, but enough. I picked up the phone and dialed a number I hadn't used in years. An old ally, someone I had once trusted in my earliest days of business before Rose came into my life and convinced me to distance myself from anyone who wasn't under her thumb. The line crackled. A familiar voice answered, cautious but not unfriendly. "Michael?" he said, surprise laced in his tone. "Didn't think I'd ever hear from you again." "There's no time for the past," I replied, my voice colder than I had ever heard it. "They're trying to destroy me. I need your help." The hesitation on the other end was brief. "Tell me everything." For the first time in weeks, a glimmer of hope flickered in my chest. I began to outline the betrayal, the forged documents, the secret sales. My ally listened intently, his sharp mind already working through the puzzle. "They're clever," he admitted, "but not invincible. If we move quickly, we can block the remaining transactions and trace where they've hidden your wealth." A breath. I hadn't realized I'd been holding escaped my lungs, but before I could allow myself even a moment of relief, another message arrived. This time, it wasn't from an unknown number. It was from Rose herself. "Michael, I hope you enjoyed the show. There's more coming. Don't bother running to your old friends. They were never loyal to you." My fist clenched around the phone, fury and pain igniting in my veins. She wasn't just stealing from me. She was mocking me, taunting me, confident in her victory. She believed I was finished. She thought she had broken me. But what she didn't realize was that this betrayal, this second blow, didn't shatter me. It forged me into something far more dangerous than the man she had once known. The game had changed, and I was no longer playing by her rules. The day of reckoning arrived not with thunder, but with a cruel, mocking sunlight that filtered through. The clouds as if the sky itself wanted to witness my humiliation. I walked into the grand hall of my former company headquarters, the place that once echoed with my commands, the place where Rose used to wait for me at the entrance with a smile. That felt like home. Now it felt foreign, hollow, and cold. Every step I took was heavy, yet precise. I wasn't a guest here. I wasn't a stranger either. I was the founder of this empire, the man whose vision had built these walls. And yet today, I was reduced to an intruder in my own kingdom. At the far end of the room, Rose stood beside Clark. She wore a pale beige dress, her eyes alight with triumph, as if she had already carved out my legacy and was admiring her prize. Clark had his arm draped lazily across her shoulders, his smirk a weapon sharper than any blade. "Michael," she greeted me, her voice sweetened with venom. "What a surprise. I didn't expect you to show up today. We were just finalizing the transition. It's almost poetic, isn't it? Handing over everything to its rightful owners. Rightful owners." The words tasted like ash in my mouth. Clark chuckled under his breath, leaning in closer to her as if to reinforce his claim over what had once been mine. I looked around at the faces filling the room. Board members, executives, investors. Some met my gaze with guilt, others with apathy, but most with silent judgment. They had already chosen their side. They believed the lies whispered in their ears, the forged documents, the staged betrayals. To them, I was the man who had let his empire rot from within. Rose had crafted her play perfectly, but I had my own script to finish. "You seem so confident," I said slowly, my voice steady despite the inferno raging in my chest. "Tell me, Rose, do you really believe you've won?" She tilted her head, her lips curling into a mockingly sweet smile. Michael, there's no need. For dramatics, the board voted. The assets have been transferred. The power of attorney is no longer yours. It's over. Her words crashed against me like waves, but I stood firm. I had already drowned once in the ocean of their betrayal. I had learned to breathe underwater. Without breaking eye contact, I reached into my coat pocket and drew out a slim envelope. Calmly, I placed it on the table between us. Clark scoffed. What's this? A love letter? Spare us the theatrics. Open it, I replied coldly. Rose hesitated. For the first time, uncertainty flickered in her eyes. She picked up the envelope with delicate fingers, unfolded the papers inside, and as her eyes scanned the contents, I saw it. The crack in her armor. Her confident expression twisted into confusion. Her brows furrowed, her lips parted slightly as if forming a question she didn't dare ask aloud. This isn't possible, she whispered. Clark snatched the papers from her hands, his eyes darting over the lines of legal text and notarized seals. His face, once smug and arrogant, drained of color. Where did you get this? He snapped, his voice tight with panic. I allowed myself a grim smile, one born not of joy, but of grim satisfaction. While you were busy stealing from me, you forgot something very important. You see, the true owner of this company isn't the one with the most signatures. It's the one with the controlling trust, a trust you both never even knew existed. Their faces paled as the realization dawned. The controlling trust? Rose repeated, her voice barely a whisper. I stepped closer. The weight of years of love turned to betrayal pressing against my chest, but not enough to crush me. Before I ever let you into my world, before I ever trusted you with my heart, I trusted no one with my empire. I set up a silent trust, overseen by third-party executors, bound by clauses that activate the moment any suspicious transfers occur. You thought you were clever, forging my signature, manipulating the board. But you triggered the very trap you never saw coming. Clark's eyes burned with fury. You're lying. This is a bluff. But even as he said it, the tremble in his voice betrayed his disbelief. Call the registrar, I said simply. Rose's hands shook as she reached for her phone. She dialed, and the entire room seemed to hold its breath. A thin, tinny voice answered on speaker. Registrar's office, the voice said briskly. This is Rose. Confirm the controlling owner of the conglomerate. Under Trust Alpha 7, she demanded. There was a pause. Papers shuffled on the other end of the line. The controlling owner is Michael, the registrar confirmed. As per the latest audit, the trust overrides all board votes and ownership claims as of yesterday morning. Silence fell like a guillotine blade. I watched as the blood drained from Rose's face, as her fingers slackened around the phone, letting it clatter to the floor. Clark's bravado shattered completely. No, this isn't over, he shouted. We can fight this. We can sue. You could try, I answered, my tone cutting through the air like ice. But every transaction you've made, every theft you've committed, is now under legal investigation. I've already filed the charges. You see, I didn't just come here for confrontation. I came to finish this. Security guards, previously stationed at the door, stepped forward at my signal. They moved with purpose, their expressions unreadable, but firm. Clark backed away, his face twisted in panic. Don't touch me! I'll ruin you! You already tried, I replied, my eyes never leaving Rose. She didn't fight. She didn't scream. She simply stood there, trembling, her gaze locked on me as if seeing me for the first time, not the man she thought she had broken, but the man who had risen from the ashes she left behind. As they were escorted out, she turned to me one last time. Her eyes, once filled with fire and ambition, were now clouded with something else. Regret. Real, devastating regret. Michael, she whispered, her voice cracking under the weight of her downfall. I never believed you could, but I didn't let her finish. That was your first mistake, Rose, I said quietly, my heart steady as stone. You never believed in me. You only believed in what you could take from me. As the doors closed behind them, sealing their fate, the suffocating weight on my chest lifted at last. The room, once filled with judgment and silent condemnation, was now mine again. Not as a man ruined by betrayal, but as a man who had reclaimed his destiny. I had faced the storm. I had stood against the flood of lies and treachery, and I had emerged unbroken. The silence that followed their departure was unlike any other. It wasn't empty. It wasn't cold. It was triumphant. I stood, alone in the center of the hall, the weight that had chained me for so long finally shattered, lying in pieces at my feet. My gaze swept over the board members. Those who had once avoided my eyes now struggled to meet them, their expressions shifting from contempt to something closer to fear, or perhaps respect born from undeniable power. It no longer mattered. Their opinions had lost all value the moment they allowed Rose and Clark to poison the veins of my empire. But I had bled, and I had survived. I cleared my throat, letting my voice fill the room with steady resolve. Effective immediately, every executive who turned their back on the company for personal gain will be audited. Your resignations will be expected before the sun sets today. No one dared protest. I left them there, frozen in place as I walked, out of the hall that had once symbolized my downfall. Outside, the world felt different, sharper, more vivid. As if the fog that had dulled my senses for so long had finally lifted, but I wasn't finished. There was still one final act to play. I made my way to the private vault, the place where my wealth had been stored. Not just in currency, but in priceless artifacts, personal mementos, irreplaceable relics of the empire I had built with my own hands. For years I had clung to these symbols of success, believing they were the pillars of my identity. Not anymore. I opened the heavy vault door, the chill of the air inside brushing against my skin like a silent challenge. Stacks of documents, bonds, and certificates lined the shelves. Jewels that could buy small countries glistened under the dim light. Antique paintings and sculptures stood as silent witnesses to my journey. I took it all in. Not with longing, but with clarity. This wealth had been both my armor and my prison. It had attracted leeches like Rose and Clark, vultures who circled waiting for a moment of weakness. I had learned too late that material riches meant nothing if they came with chains. Without hesitation, I reached for the detonator tucked inside my jacket. A small, inconspicuous device, but one that would change everything. Yes, I had prepared for this, because victory was never about reclaiming what was stolen. It was about destroying the very bait they had used to trap me. I pressed the button. Nothing dramatic happened at first. Just a low rumble, like the earth itself clearing its throat. Then, a series of controlled explosions tore through the vault, consuming everything in fire and smoke. Flames danced across priceless paintings, reducing them to ash. Gold melted into useless puddles. Documents curled and blackened until they were nothing but dust. I watched it all burn, my heart steady, my breath calm. This was not destruction. This was liberation. Outside, alarms blared and staff scrambled in panic, but I remained rooted, watching as the fire cleansed every last remnant of my old life. By the time the fire crews arrived, there was nothing left to save. I stepped away from the wreckage, my footsteps light, my soul unburdened. Reporters swarmed, their cameras flashing, their voices clamoring for answers. "Michael, why did you do it? Was this revenge? What happens now?" I met their questions with a single, unwavering answer. Freedom. That word rippled through the crowd, leaving a stunned silence in its wake. But my story didn't end there. No, true closure required more than fire. It required justice. Days later, news broke of the criminal investigations into Rose and Clark. Fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy. The charges stacked against them like a mountain too steep to climb. Leaked recordings surfaced, exposing their backroom deals and manipulation of the board. Every lie they had woven unraveled before the public eye. Their names, once whispered in admiration, were now spoken with disgust. Their empire of deceit crumbled, just as surely as my vault had burned. Rose, once the embodiment of cold ambition, was paraded before cameras in handcuffs, her once flawless image shattered beyond repair. Clark, desperate and hollow-eyed, tried to spin their downfall as a mistake, but no one believed him anymore. Justice had come, not in the form of petty revenge, but in the undeniable power of truth revealed. But even that wasn't the true ending I sought. I returned to the small house at the edge of the city, the one I had bought long ago, far from the glare of wealth and ambition. It was modest, with weathered wood and a quiet garden that swayed gently in the breeze. It was here, in this quiet sanctuary, that I found something no vault could hold. Peace. I walked through the overgrown paths, feeling the sun warm my skin. For the first time in years, I breathed without the weight of expectation pressing on my chest. I had no riches, no titles, no chains, and yet I had never felt richer. As I stood beneath the shade of an old oak tree, a familiar voice called out to me. Michael. I turned to see Ashley, the one person who had stood at a distance, never demanding, never deceiving. Her eyes held no greed, only concern and quiet strength. You really did it, she said softly, stepping closer. You burned it all. I had to, I replied. To build something real, you have to clear the ruins first. She smiled, a gentle curve of her lips that held no mockery, only understanding. Then let's build something that can't be stolen. In that moment, I realized the final truth. Empire had never been the skyscrapers, the vaults, or the gold. It had always been my will, my heart, and the people who truly saw me, not as a fortune to be plundered, but as a man worth standing beside. I extended my hand to Ashley, and without hesitation, she took it. Together, we stepped away from the ashes of the past and into a future unshackled by greed and betrayal. My story, once defined by loss and vengeance, was now written in freedom and hope. And that, more than any fortune, was my ultimate victory.